Good evening, bonsoir, Dia Vacharja. Welcome to Addressing the Nations. We at the Centre Culturel Irlandais in Paris are delighted to present 4 evenings of important and emotive speeches from contemporary Irish voices. 2020 was the year of the televised political address to nations, but now is the time for our artists and creative thinkers, our cultural augurs, to have their say and set their roadmap for our future. The CCI commissioned 40 artists to address the world with their reflections on the time in which we live. Our online platforms became the stage from which these invigorating voices from the Irish art scene can be heard and shared. The invited artists convey their values, their preoccupations, their anger and frustrations, as well as messages of courage, joy, gratitude, desire and aspiration. We launch Addressing the Nations on Inauguration Day in the United States, offering Irish artists across the world the chance to address the burning issues of our time: the impact of COVID-19, inequality, Brexit, populism, and mental health. On this day too, we take great pride in launching our new ambitious strategic plan as we continue to play our part in Ireland's efforts to extend its global footprint. I would like to take the opportunity to thank Culture Ireland and the Irish Embassy in Paris, our 2 key funding partners. I thank my dedicated team here in the Centre Culturel. I thank our artists. I know it was a difficult ask, and I have been overwhelmed by the response. Thank you for joining us. You might like to download our programme with the full text from our website. Please do join us tomorrow and next week for more inspiring addresses. And now, before our first address, the Centre Culturel Irlandais cultural ambassador, actor Adrian Dunbar, is phoning in with a message of support. I wish you a most enjoyable evening. Slán live, à très bientôt. And handing over to you now, Adrian.
Hello, my name is Adrian Dunbar, and I'd like to welcome you to Addressing the Nations, where Irish artists have a platform to express to us how they feel about this very difficult time we are living through culturally at the moment. Of course, the arts have no borders, and culture will not be confined. As the great James Connolly, the Irish socialist, once said, he wanted his Irish Republic to be as a beacon of light on the western seaboard of Europe for smaller nations. Well, as the Centre Culturel Irlandais will testify, the cultural presence of Ireland has long been felt on the European mainland. And I would like to hope that we will shine as a beacon of cultural light on the western seaboard of Europe for many years to come. I hope you have a stimulating time. Bye.
I stand here at a pivotal time, on the border of a year defined by isolation and on the cusp of a year filled with hope. Hope that we can once again soon embrace each other and fulfil our base human need for collective gatherings and shared experiences. I also stand in a pivotal space, on the edge of the European Union. Behind me, Northern Ireland. In front of me, the Republic of Ireland. Beneath me, the border. 499 kilometres of winding, twisting paths, roads, rivers and streams, including the one upon which I stand. This border, a place between, not quite here and not quite there, has weaved its way in and out of people's lives for 100 years. And as we enter this anniversary year, the winds of change and challenge blow. And they will, like many such winds, raise more stormy questions than settled answers. They will, nonetheless, provide time for reflection and consideration. And at the helm of that reflection will, I hope, be the artists and the creative thinkers, the voices that will provide for new insights, new ideas, and new solutions. For the challenges that we face are not just of this border, they are of this world, and we face them with increasing ferocity. The desire to get back to normality after a year of such turmoil is understandable. However, our pre-COVID normal was not a safe space or a desirable place for many. The separation between the haves and the have-nots is increasing. Almost half the world's population lives on less than €5 a day. Combine this increasing inequality with diminished agency, with a political and financial system that leaves too many people feeling helpless and hopeless. And as Daniel Lazare puts it, politics will grow more irrational and self-defeating, whilst the price of the good life will continue its upwards climb beyond the reach of all but the most affluent, whilst millions of people will grow angrier and more depressed. However, the human species has an amazing ability to reimagine, rebuild, and re-emerge. Can we calm the storms and settle the winds? Can we support evolution? Or will we be forced into revolution? If we wish to tackle this normality, our reality, we will have to be braver and more considered. We will have to act with more compassion and more collective action. And in the words of Killer Mike, we will have to plot, plan, strategise, organise and mobilise. For if we do not, change will come with us or in spite of us.
This year I've been thinking a lot about holy wells. The best holy wells are like the best cities. They're ecosystems where monotheistic religion coexists peacefully, symbiotically even, with paganism, superstition and folklore. The best holy wells are spaces where people are free to build their own beliefs, establish their own rituals. I have a non-religious devotion to many holy wells, chief amongst them Tubernault in Sligo. I like to check out how the rag trees are progressing, take a turn around the stream, stick a few of the sacred hazelnuts in my pocket. This year, though, I wasn't able to visit Tubernault until late in the summer. When I went to see the rag trees, I was confronted with something I'd never seen before. The trees were draped in blue, festooned in sky blue and royal blue and navy blue. These weren't any of the blues we associate with the Virgin Mary. They were PPE blues. The rag tree was covered in masks, so many masks, so many hopes for others. The sight brought me to tears because it was evidence of people finding new ways to think about, love one another. New rituals woven into the fabric of the old. All this year, we've been building new rituals, and we need to keep building them. We need new rituals to supplement the old, to guide us through experiences we've never had before. We need rituals to build kinship and empathy without touching. We need new rituals to guide us through all the things we've always experienced in person and for the moment can only experience from a distance. We need rituals to help us celebrate a wedding live stream, to guide us through watching a loved one's funeral on a screen. We need something beyond the time-honoured Irish ritual of getting drunk alone in somebody's honour. We need new rituals to help us feel the weight of joy, to help us bear the weight of grief, to metabolize emotions as we watch events close to our hearts from a physical remove. Help is coming, but we will need to hold fast for some time. There'll come a day when we have a ritual for the first time we get to hold someone we haven't touched in a year. Until then, we need to keep building.
Deep in the boglands of northwest Donegal, there is a glen where, according to legend, Balor of the Fomorian giants was killed by a spear that pierced the magical eye from his head. Hitting a rock, the eye split open and a poison spilled out across the earth. It was here, in this poisoned glen, that I was standing on the day the Irish Taoiseach delivered a warning to the nation. This is uncharted territory, he said. In the glen, not even a pandemic can still the shifting plot of deep black streams, of sheep scattered like strange pearls across the mountains, of muck trails tumbling down from the peaks. When the light moves, it moves like a wing in slow motion, and it changes everything. To stand here among heather and rock is to stand up on a threshold and look down through a portal into another world. But how to pass through this portal? What are we being asked to leave behind? How will we know when we have reached the other side? In these uncertain times of lockdown and restriction, all I can do as a poet is speculate and imagine as I wait, as I clear space, as I free new meaning, as I try to find ways of seeing beyond ordinary perception. In a recent poem about the arrival of the Fomorians on the Donegal Islands, I ask, what did they want, these giants? What, if anything, could stop them? The poem wrestles with the idea of terror and what it is to live in constant fear and in a state outside of astonishment. It's a fairy tale poem, and like all fairy tales, it holds at its heart the experience of human suffering. Death is the poem's shadow, and yet at some point the sun moves, the shadows shift. Over time, the islanders could be seen on the island again. Slowly, they began to build fires. One day, a vessel like a boat appeared to float on water. What will I say about this moment of history once it is past? I hope to say that as a poet I tried to see things I never saw before. I tried to pay attention to stories inscribed into earth. I wrote about islands. I stood at the entrance of megalithic tombs. I combed church graveyards and ruins. I kneeled to ancient wells and found in those waters the shivering image of a woman who reminded me less and more every day of myself. I hope to say that I tried as best I could to look down through the glen and to bear witness to another world.
It began in February. I started a residency at Trinity and presented the Raft project, made with my Brexit-weary, border-dwelling neighbours, a photomontage of Gerakul's wonderful painting, The Raft of the Medusa. Then, in a brief moment, the tide turned and we were all left clinging on to the life raft. A COVID wind blasted in from nowhere, gathering pace as it whipped round the globe and smashed all our doors closed in its deadly draught. Keeping the door closed, however, is not a long-term strategy. We're being forced to break with the past and have the opportunity to imagine our world anew. 2020 has been described as the year of global humbling, a moment when we collectively realise that the confident certainties of what we knew as normal can disappear in a heartbeat. Our planet is in crisis. Another black man is murdered, his final breath trapped in cell phone images and witnessed by all of us here. The tangerine carcass of old capitalism, like Shelley's Frankenstein, juddering to life, stumbling and finally stepping out onto that iceberg, drifting in the dark silence. Life has become anxiety-ridden and increasingly precarious. We are all in this together and simultaneously encouraged to stay apart. We wash our groceries, sanitize the doorbell, and listen to stories about the Spanish flu. In the spring, I began making anatomical drawings. Heart, lungs, and brain describe the pulsing physicality of being alive. These images fuse with my imaginings of early flowers floating in movement through the garden window to become my first animation project. Drawing has my trust. It has always sustained me in tough times. I stay focused. The work gathers me in and reassures me. I leave behind the babbling TV voices and move into my own entirely magical space. The robust, heartfelt kindness experienced in Irish communities reassures me all will be well. Ourselves alone, the ghost of memory, flits through my head. Superstitious ribbons and St. Bridget's red rags impaled on thorns, suffering on, offering it up, enduring at all costs, doing the right thing. Amulets threaded with nostalgia. I plead for a better future. A borderless place both snug and wide open, with a doorway never needing to be closed. As an Ulster woman, I continue to find inspiration in the African American struggle. I want to imagine not the threat of freedom or its tentative, grasping fragility, but the concrete wisdom of borderlessness. Love takes off the masks that we fear we cannot live without, and know we cannot live within.
Today in Brooklyn, I'm thinking about the inauguration and what lies ahead. Back in the days of past empires, augurs stood on steps and interpreted the songs of birds, tracked their flight paths to mark auspicious days. But this was never a portent of the future. It was more a statement of the nowness of the time. When we look back on these recent years from a place of lesser hate and more even kindness, what will we take with us? The sound of 1,000,000 women roaring, a united voice that echoed around the world. Furious, knowing that it was never about Russian bots and unlikability. It was about misogyny and preserving whiteness. The whiteness of the braying donkey boys of Charlottesville, marching to demand their own importance. Or the arrogant screeches of COVID deniers, fighting the nurses who tried to keep them alive. Or will we remember the helicopters and sirens as we took to the streets, repeating the final 3 words whispered by so many? I can't breathe. Or the sounds of ambulances and forklifts that reverberated inside refrigerated trucks packed with bodies, where they kept Grandma Dolly for months before we could bury her.
All right, go for it. Blow them out, Grandma.
Blow them out?
Yeah, go for it. All right.
One breath.
What will we remember? Not omens taken from flight paths or bird song or fake news, but the words on the signs we carried in the streets. Activists are our new augurs. Their demands a roadmap. An inauguration is never a prediction of the future, but a snapshot of where we're at. Standing together in this present moment. Understanding that progress is never linear, but seeing this rising rush of longed for hope and change. Understanding now that there can be no more margins, because we're not minorities. We're not other. We're not niche. We are unique. And what we do with that belongs entirely to us.
We've all had those moments in life when we don't quite know how we're going to survive. And God knows we all had a little cry when they announced another lockdown. But getting through 2020 meant something different for me. This Christmas marked the anniversary of my release from a lock-up psychiatric ward. I've so much to tell you about what happened in there, but for now, I'll just share this. At one stage, a friend came to visit and brought me a Christmas gift. And the gift bag was confiscated because according to regulations, the ribbon might have posed a health risk. I'm here to tell you that shit happens. And shit was happening long before coronavirus hit. We've all heard it said, this is unprecedented, catastrophic, this global pandemic. But for those of us with chronic illness, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, anorexia, fibromyalgia, and so many other various conditions that have had us thrown from any position of privilege into a loss of control of our senses. For those of us who have known this overwhelming disempowerment that we just must accept as part and parcel of our existence, yes, this global pandemic has raised extra complex issues. But for us, so many of these issues are nothing new. And if you want to get through this pandemic, here's something unprecedented for you. You do well to listen to some of us mental patients, disabled citizens, and people who have been living on the fringes, isolated, invisible, until now. Until this moment where I turn the tables and say, if you don't know how to get through another day, look how people have been surviving and even thriving in conditions and restrictions more baffling and dehumanizing than what most of the population could ever imagine. When you've lived on the margins, you learn to appreciate every inch of space you get to live. And what I've learned is, it's all about perspective. When you feel powerless in all of this, whatever your circumstances, remember, it is not what we go through, but our response to it that makes a difference.
Solstice is the shortest day and the longest night of the year. It's all uphill from here. How are you? I'm alright. It's the darkness, it gets me every time. Have you called this line before? No, it's my first time. I feel like I'm living on death's door, and I need someone to talk to. Are you sure you're alright? Will you be okay tonight? I can stay on the line. Last night I was in A&E with a self-inflicted wound, and they told me not to move. This isn't where I should be, I said. I have a hole in my head. Please don't do it.
what isn't said becomes a symptom. That symptom could be a disease. That disease could kill you spiritually or literally. 2020 has seen many of society's symptoms rise to the surface. It's been a whirlwind for the human race. I know I have definitely struggled. I've been dealing with mental health problems my whole life. So when a virus like this first comes along, it's utter panic. I was thinking the absolute worst, such as the nature of anxiety. I began to realise that my crippling anxiety was not allowing me to enjoy the time I was spending with my loved ones. I was zoned into the cancer that is social media that told me the world was going to end. It really did feel like the apocalypse. I crashed and burned. When I arose, I looked around me and I saw the same things going on, like clockwork. But this time I could see through them. This pandemic put us all in the same boat. No matter what the colour of your skin was, your ethnic background, sex, or sexuality, rich or poor, we're all human beings, which means any of us could contract this virus. I think knowing that makes it harder for anyone to dehumanize another. Two things helped me get through 2020. The first is purpose. Mine is to create. Expressing myself through writing and performing gives me a feeling of catharsis that I've been unable to find anywhere else. The second is love. I'm lucky to have many family and friends who love me and who show it when it matters most, as do I with them. We all need love. Love transcends all life's bullshit. For all the positive things I think we've learned throughout this pandemic, I do believe it's time for the human race to stop and think about where we're going. We have never been more connected technically, but in my opinion, we are now more disconnected spiritually than we have ever been. For me, the key is to express yourself, to never embrace Ireland's favourite tool, repression, to focus on your loved ones, your purpose, and to embrace Mother Nature. I don't know if this is a speech, a rant, or just my thoughts on 2020, but it's all I've got to say. Peace and love.
After a year-long exile to the nooks and crannies of our homes, we find ourselves still stranded in the island of our abodes, condemned to more days of glitchy video calls, an unhealthy pick and mix of our social media feeds, and news cycle pills, a daily dose of COVID death updates. What we do know is we are living with an invisible virus in our midst, capable of wiping out our entire species. Nonetheless, we are grateful for loved ones being safe and sound just a phone call away, for being able to transform our bedrooms into workshops at the touch of a button. Thankful for open fields and cold air, for well-tended gardens and wildflowers sprouting by the seaside. While we ached for brighter days, an old foe came calling in May. Another epidemic called racism had grown wings and taken flight across the Western world, migrating from Minneapolis to a Dublin suburb. In outrage, we took to the streets to protest, leaving our doors unguarded as an animal called grief wandered into our homes, reeking of decades of systemic oppression. Anyone who saw us must have thought we were dancing. Our flailing arms and upturned faces, the way we wield our voices like weapons and swing our Black Lives Matter banners. Sweat-drenched, teeth gritted with determination, and our eyes gleaming with hope for a better future. Were we not almost buried alive as we burrowed deeper into the dirt, desperate to unearth a miracle to make wine from the bitter fruits of a near barren year? Grief is a ravenous animal, rabid and roaming around a parched wasteland. The poet is a fly perched on the tail of that wild wounded thing. How could they understand our dilemma? Why we hesitated, misty-eyed as the flames clawed at our curved backs, curious to glimpse once more the red glow of our days past and passing swiftly. We waited, hovering over the world as we've known it, and watched as it was leveled by fire and brimstone. And standing there, with the old world burning to our rear, we clutch each other's calloused hands and point our eyes at the glorious gloaming of a new dawn. The verdant valleys glistening with morning dew, the wind kissing our cheek, welcoming us with a familiar song, sweet as a nursery rhyme, or perhaps an ancient battle cry.
Palante is a Spanish word. It is a contraction of two words, para and adelante. Para meaning for and adelante meaning ahead. But together, contracted, they make one explosive word, palante, a battle cry that urges, go forward, keep going. A cry of defiance often. Palante, keep going. Before this bewildering year, our preoccupations were myriad. But then this year, the status quo was disrupted and our priorities became simpler, our desires distilled. Because confined now to a shrunken social circle, we were blessed if that space included our most precious people. And if it did not, we longed to be with them, and we felt it in our blood and bones when we couldn't. We were forced into a new version of life, whether it was the stew of simultaneous parenting, working, or the solitude of longer walks on the beach, or suddenly having the time to make breakfasts with notions, or even in the stretch of the day worrying that you'd slow down so much that you might never be able to rev yourself back up again. But even as we stood still, we kept moving, because in this strange kind of paralysis, there was also the action of going deeper inside your smaller circle, examining everything in your 5K, a lane you never went down before, a window you never peered into before, a hill you never climbed, sitting in your dad's garden watching him work in the sun from a distance, finding those moments in nature where the soul inside meets something that it recognizes. And so doing all this, we kept going. We all did, with increased curiosity and empathy. And here we are, in the wake of this remarkable year, exhausted but coiled and ready to spring back into the larger world and all that it has to offer us. That world we go back to after this might not be so different to what it was before, but we are different now. And what is the potential of that? What is our new potential? Now that we have shared a vivid and collective experience, now that our connections with each other are sharper and we place value differently, what can we be with the knowledge we now have about what is actually enough? And now that we know that we can keep going, we contracted and now we explode. Palante, my friends. Palante.